Okay, welcome back to Hindustan Astrology. I'm Katya, and in today's video we have Dr. Santhip Kanholy back. Thank you so much for joining me. And in today's video we're going to talk about Venus, or Shukra as he's called in the Vedas, through the Nakshatras. So how he behaves in the different Nakshatras that he rules. So thank you so much, Santhip, for coming back.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Gatis. One thing I want to just say was that I think I feel very blessed today to actually talk about Venus, because you have Moon is actually transiting Venus right now. You know, the Venus is exactly on top of Venus is retrograde right now. Venus is also in Mrigashira Nakshatra by transit, and Moon is definitely is very close to that Venus because of that. So, so I feel very good about that, So that's the first thing I wanted to share. Now let's see. I think I have to share my screen. So I think you have to enable sharing screen on your part. But before let me talk a little bit about Venus first. Now, Venus is a very important planet to be understood, because what you see with Venus is that Venus is the planet of arts. Venus is the planet of relationships. But then we just stop it at there. There's a lot of depth with Venus. There's a lot of things you can actually achieve with Venus also. And I think it's one of those it's kind of important to understand Venus through the science its rules. I mean, we all have an understanding about that with Taurus and, Libra and so forth. But then, we also we can actually get a deeper dimension of what Venus is through the nakshatra that is connected with. And that's what we'll talk about today.
Okay.
First, I'll begin to share my screen. So let's see. So first of all, yeah. So in the zodiac sign, in the zodiac signs, you have I've highlighted the Venus connected nakshatras here with a different color. So you have the Venus nakshatras or Venus ruled nakshatras as per the Vimshotri Dasha system is the Bharani nakshatra, Purvafalguni nakshatra, and Purvashada nakshatra, which I've highlighted here. And then, we are familiar with Venus ruled Rashis being Taurus and Libra, which I've again highlighted here. Now the nakshatras falling in these Rashis will also have a link with Venus. So right now, as I was mentioning, Venus is in Mrigashira nakshatra here in Taurus, and Moon is very close to that. And then you also see that Venus is also linked with Libra as well. So the nakshatras that are falling in here in Libra sign, which is Chitra, Swati and Vishaka, are also kind of linked with Venus. It's carrying that Venusian energy as well. And then, we know that Venus is actually getting debilitated in Chitra. Venus is getting exalted in Revati as well. And those nakshatras will also play a fact. And then Venus is having its Mulatrikon in Swati as well. Now we'll begin to look at each of these one by one, So first thing is that Venus is actually associated with the Bharani Nakshatra, Purvafalguni Nakshatra, and Purvashada Nakshatra in the Vimshotri system. Now, what is interesting about Bharani is that Bharani is linked with the god Yama, who is the god of death. But at the same time, the symbol of Bharani Nakshatra is that of a womb, which is a place of birth as well. So it's kind of showing this deep symbolic death for a new birth to happen. Now, it's kind of showing this complete balance between birth and death that is supposed to happen. That is always there, So when the state of a pregnant woman dies, then she becomes a mother, then a child is born also in between. So it's a very interesting thing to think about. There's a lot of very intense kind of an experience that is happening here with Bharani Nakshatra. And a lot of sexuality is very strong here, especially with the symbol of the womb being there also. And then you also have Purvafalguni Nakshatra, which is actually linked with children. Remember, it is falling in the natural fifth house of the zodiac, which is actually linked with children and so forth. In fact, Purvafalguni Nakshatra is also linked with eggs in general. There is a word called as Hiranyagarbha. Hiranyagarbha is literally the womb, the golden egg. The golden egg, which is a name for sun, actually. So, and that is also one of the descriptions for Vishnu and many of the gods and goddesses, So in the sense that the Hiranyagarbha is this golden egg which is carrying this birth into this life and so forth. And Purvashada is actually the link, and Purafalguni is linked with Bhaga as well. Bhaga is the god of fortune. He's a god of marriages also, and then finally you have Purvashada, which is actually linked with the goddess Apas, who is the elemental god, who is the water goddess actually, and she is a water goddess who is considered as a priestess. Now you'll find almost in all rituals there is some kind of water that is involved, and we'll kind of have a deeper understanding about this as we go along the presentation also. Now again, I have to highlight the Venus linked nakshatras of Revati, where Venus is getting exalted, and Venus is getting debilitated in Chitra, and Venus is having its Mula Trikona in Swati as well. These three nakshatras are also linked with Venus. Now, for instance, you can think about Chitra as being, well, you can think about Revati as being the point of surrender. You're actually surrendering. It's falling it's the last nakshatra in the final zodiac of the chart. So, this is the point. So this is a real point of devotion. Now, it is, remember, Pisces, the natural 12th house of the zodiac, is actually a moksha sign. So what happens is that you will find that these natives are really, really willing to surrender. They are willing to let go. They are willing to devote themselves to God and all that. There is a natural sense of devotion that is very much present in Revati. Natural sense of surrender, and that's what happens. At the end of the day, all you can do is surrender yourself to the will of the universe. That kind of thing. And then in Swati Nakshatra, it is actually linked with breath. Now, it's very interesting to think about Venus through surrender and breath. Now, Venus is the planet of surrender, right? Venus is also the planet of relationship as well. So you find that you surrender yourself to your partner. That is what happens. Now, you can think about a partner as someone who is willing to take your breath away, right? It's an easy thing. So when you are with your partner, suddenly, your breathing is different and so forth. You literally see that playing out. And in Chitra, what is very interesting is that Chitra is actually linked with sculptures, with art pieces, really. There is this technical side of art, which is very much linked with Chitra. Yeah. So now, from the gods and from the deity perspective, Revati is actually having a link with Pushan, who is a nurturing god, who is the shepherd amongst the Nakshatra Devatas. Then you have Swati being linked with Vayu, who is the god of wind. So he's literally the breathing god, the god of your breath. And then finally you have Chitra being linked with Vishwakarma, who is a celestial architect. Now here it is actually showing the technical side of creating the universe. Now Chitra also translates as pictures. So within the context of relationship, it can actually indicate the picture of your loved one. That's the key thing you can see. You can see that usually you are more willing to take a picture with your partner than anyone else. That's a very natural thing that happens also. So yeah, let's see. So yeah, that's what I'm calling it as Venus VIP nakshatra. Now we are going to think about Venus in terms of the items it represents and so forth, and we are trying to see how the nakshatras can be linked with these items. Now, when you think about Venus, you think about things that are soft in nature, things that are beautiful, things that are in harmony and so forth. So clothes for sure, you'll find a lot of people having a link with clothes with the Venusian kind of karma. So you'll find now if you actually think about a cloth is actually very soft. In fact, Venus is actually linked with silk cloth. Now, if you look at how a silk cloth is obtained, you obtain it from the thread of the silkworm and so forth. And then there's a lot of process involved before you actually get a cloth in your hand. The cloth which you're wearing also. Now, the flower is very interesting. The flower is something that actually gives off fragrance. So it's actually, you smell good. You're around very good smells and so forth. And the flower is also, remember, flower is carrying the seed of the plant also. Remember that Shukra is also translates to as semen. So you find that Venus is also a karaka for Shukra as well, all the reproduction. You'll find that also very strongly. Now we are going to look at flowers in a kind of deeper way. So now, say you have a bunch of flowers, right? Now, so here I have a question for you, Katya. So where do you use flower? Like, how do you use flowers in general in our daily lives? Like, in what occasions would you use flowers?
Oh, perfume. Lots of perfume.
Okay.
Incense, oils, essential oils for my diffuser. Of course, from, cutting them, putting them in vases. On my
Mm-hmm.
clothing, you see I wore flowers
Mm-hmm.
today.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like that.
Sure. Right. Let's see. So now let me ask you in one more way. Like, what are the occasions where you will always see flowers for sure? Like, what occasion? So it would be,
Oh, well,
now, for
wedding,
instance,
funerals,
weddings, right? Funerals,
um,
right?
birthday parties, any
Parties, right?
celebration, right?
Right. Any celebration, exactly that. Now let's begin to look at that, right? So first, say you have a face, you put a flower, you use it as makeup, right? So you literally are using flowers as fragrances, flowers as decor item on your head, decoration, all that, right? You can see that easily. This one something very easy thing that you can do, and that's definitely flowers are used as decoration item. And as you mentioned, it is also used for perfumes and stuff, which we use in our makeup, So that is a naturally expected there. That has its role there. And then the next place where you could think about flowers as being used is in romantic gifts, right? You're giving a flower to your loved one. And of course, in birthday parties and stuff for that, definitely we do use that. And then, as you correctly mentioned, in weddings also, you use flowers, right? So weddings definitely have a lot of flower decorations around and so forth. That is definitely happening. You can also think about flowers as being used in rituals as well. Especially in religious rituals, definitely there will be a lot of flowers. Ideally, well, in Hindu religious rituals, definitely you do use a lot of flowers. Definitely most
Yeah.
of the rituals you perform, flowers can enhance that ritual one way or the other also. Now, the other occasion, as you also pointed out, is funerals. So you can see you send flowers to a funeral and so forth. That is something that happens. Now, there are a couple more places where I can actually say. Now, one is actually your own workplace. There's a good chance that you might find some kind of office decor items with flowers. You have a flower thing. You go to an office. It's like a decor item there. You have flowers happening there. And finally, flowers are also great for bed pleasures. Why you will find this flower decor items, flowers spread out on the bed and so forth. Right? I think what's the movie, the American, I forgot the name, American Dream or something. The
Right.
the guy which Kevin Spacey on, you find flowers, little
American
the
Beauty.
rose.
American Beauty.
American Beauty, yeah, that's exactly that. Right.
Yeah.
You see
There's
that,
a
right? So you see
rose.
flower
There's a
completely.
rose named after. It's a hybrid called American Beauty. Yeah.
Right. So that's yeah. I didn't know that, but exactly. You see that it's literally spread on the bed. So that kind of thing. So there's a symbolic thing there. So definitely flowers are used also for bed pleasure and so forth. Now here's the interesting part, right? So flowers are karaka for Venus. Now if we begin to think about the zodiac and begin to connect the nakshatras with the Venus, we get an interesting thing. So immediately you can almost superimpose the entire zodiac on top of the use. So you see here Venus ruled Rashi is basically Taurus, where which is actually the second house of
The
face, where you
face.
can use flowers. Yep, it's used as
Uh-huh.
ornaments. Now Venus is also linked as ornaments, and then as you also pointed out, the weddings. So Venus is also linked with marriage. So you find that flowers are very much present there in marriage also on the occasion of marriage. And then you're looking at the other nakshatras which I pointed out. You can see that Venus, the flowers are actually used in Barni, which is a funeral. Venus is Pura Falguni is also very romantic nakshatra. So you find that romantic gifts where where you see it very much strongly associated with Pura Falguni as well. And because it's a Venus ruled nakshatra as well. And then Purvashada is a religious kind of a nakshatra, very priest kind of nakshatra. You find that, and with the water spirits and so forth, you find flowers are actually used in the religious rituals and so forth also. And then looking at the other which I mentioned, the Chitra nakshatra the Chitra is falling in the natural sixth house of zodiac, which is actually your routines, your workplace, and so forth. So you find flowers happening there. And Venus is exalted in Revati, which is your highest point of surrender, to your partner. So you find that also happening in Pisces as well. And then, of course, in weddings, which is a Swati, where a lot of people are gathering, there's a social event that is happening and so forth.
Wow.
So definitely, so you can see how Venus as a Karka, just by understanding the flowers by itself, you can immediately connect with the nakshatras it is linked with. So now I'm going to take it to the next level of sorts. So sort of like just to enhance this understanding of Venus again through his nakshatras as well. So now again, remember these, the nakshatras. I'm just repeating them again. All the Venus ruled nakshatra, which is Bharani, Pura Falguni, and Purvashada. You have the Venus the nakshatras falling in Venus sign, which is Kritika, Rohini, Mrigashira, Chitra, Swati, Vishaka. And then the other important points as far as Venus is concerned, which is Revati, Chitra, and Swati, what is getting exalted, debilitated, and having its mood tripod, Now let's see. Now, I wanted to highlight this particular painting of Venus, So, I don't know if there is a new series on Netflix of the Medici, right? The Medici family, which is actually linked
Oh, really? Oh,
with
I
the
have to watch
Renaissance.
it.
Yeah, yeah. So it's actually an interesting series in which it's kind of highlighting one of the Medicis who was very much responsible for bringing about this Renaissance in Europe. Renaissance, this entire era of Renaissance and Renaissance and so forth. So it was very interesting. I mean, of course, the series is interesting by default. But then, what is interesting is that one of the characters there, one of the actual characters in that series is actually Botticelli. Botticelli is actually the painter who now what is interesting about Botticelli is he actually created this painting called as Birth of Venus. Now, very fascinating thing is that he created this painting, Birth of Venus, and then 1 century later, within 1 century, there was a complete change in the change in thinking as far as Europe was concerned. This entire Renaissance kind of thinking played out, where man suddenly became subject to the paintings more than God. This entire shift in thinking started to play out. So you can see how even a painting of Venus can also change, bring a lot of energy. And that's what he did, in my opinion. That's what is actually he did. When he gave birth to Venus through his painting, that birthed out entire Venus kind of energy over that entire region of Italy. That brought about the entire Renaissance also. It was very shift in thinking with regard to his paintings. The series gives a very dramatic portrayal of that ideas and so forth. The fighting against the contemporary church and so forth. So that kind of thing was very strong. But it's a very interesting thing to think about. With this particular painting, with Venus in general, and so forth also. And of course, Venus linked with paintings and artists and so forth. Good chance that you have very strong Venus involved in the chart if you are an artist, whether it be painters or dancers alike. That's one thing. Now, what is interesting astronomically with respect to Venus is that when you look at the orbits of Venus around the Earth, you find that Venus is over a period of time, Venus actually formed this flower-like pattern, this pentagram kind of pattern in the sky. So, many times Venus in many esoteric traditions is actually linked with a 5-petal flower also, 5-petal rose also. In fact, there is this entire Rosicrucian kind of order, which is actually named after a rose, which is actually linked with Venus also. So remember in Venusian kind of thing, it is when looking at the orbits of Sun, orbits of Venus around the Sun, it is actually pointing out a flower kind of pattern in the sky as well. So it's very interesting to see this flower kind of link between Venus, not only in the Earth plane, in our own daily experiences, also in the skies as well. So it is very interesting on that regard. Now, and of course, you have the pentagram, which is actually a sign of symbol of Venus. In many traditions, they actually would draw a star to actually represent Venus also. Usually there is this Ishtar kind of a goddess, if you're familiar with that, that really carrying that Venusian kind of energy also. And it's a fascinating thing. Yeah. What is very fascinating is that you can see that there are certain other numbers that can also be very, very interesting here when you're looking at looking within the context of the journey Venus takes around the sun. You find that the Earth actually orbits around the sun 8 times, and Venus actually orbits around the sun 13 times. So there is an interest, and 8 and 13 are very special numbers for those who are familiar with it. So for instance, if you look at the Fibonacci series, right, you find that 8 and 13 are basically subsequent numbers in the Fibonacci series. You can see that Fibonacci series is where you add 1 with 1, and then you add 2, and you keep on bringing it up, and finally you find 8 and 13 being numbers forming really in the Fibonacci. And very interesting to see, actually there is a link between the Earth's orbit around the sun and Venus orbit around the sun with respect to the Fibonacci series. So there is a series kind of thing. There's an harmony and order around that particular orbital periods, of Venus and Earth also. So now taking it further, now if you look at the Fibonacci sequence, it's a very important sequence of numbers. I mean, for those who are into the occult arts, or for those who are into sacred geometry and stuff like that, this would be very obvious for them. You find that Fibonacci sequence is repeated by nature on many accounts. Almost all pieces of nature is carrying this Fibonacci sequence within them. In fact, the golden ratio is a ratio between the numbers that are maintained, and that particular ratio has been maintained throughout a lot of works of nature and so forth. Like whatever nature has created, it is expressing itself through the golden ratio. That is how it is happening. Within the golden ratio, you can also create something called as the golden spiral, in which you are actually spiraling with these Fibonacci sequence also, with these numbers. There is a way to create this also. It's a very interesting thing to consider this golden spiral as hidden within the Fibonacci sequence. That is one thing just to think about. Now, and what is interesting about this golden spiral is that you actually find that golden spiral repeated in many works of ancient monuments and temples and churches and so forth. You find that the Greeks definitely knew it. They were using it consciously. They were definitely using it in the construction. So they were actually creating their buildings in harmony with nature and evoking those natural principles when they did that so also. And then, of course, you can find yeah, exactly. There's a natural kind of symmetry going on. And of course, the pentagram of Venus, which we talked about as being linked with Venus, is also having a golden ratio hidden within it also. You can actually create that. So pentagram is actually having this particular length, carrying this golden ratio length.
Can I say something really fast? It's fascinating how the pentagram and the number 13 were considered evil by the Christians, in
exactly.
Britain, and everything that was associated with Venus was considered pagan and negative. And so I just think that's it's something interesting to point out. And also the spiral. This is how the evolution of Venus is the spiral pattern where we're repeating the patterns, but it's becoming it comes to a higher octave. So that's why music
exactly
is
that. Now, yep, exactly, definitely. So definitely there is a higher octave kind of thing, a spiral kind of thing, in which the same patterns are repeating. For sure, that is a very strong theme associated with Venus for sure. And definitely, even if you think about your partners in your life, you see that they actually reflect an aspect about yourself also. There is an actual aspect of a spiral of sorts. You see yourself in your partner, an aspect of yourself within your partner, and so forth. But yeah, no, definitely the spiral is very important concept. The golden spiral is hidden there. It maintains the golden ratio within that particular thing. I mean, the phi or the golden ratio is present very much in everything. This 1.618 number is very much present in many works of arts and nature, hidden, in many ways. And now what is interesting is that you also see the golden spiral or the golden ratios playing out in our own faces also on many accounts. You find that, remember the natural second house of the zodiac is actually Venus, which is actually a phase also, which is ruled by Taurus, right? So that is ruled by Venus again. So you find a lot of golden spiral patterns falling in the natural second house of the zodiac, which is your phase also. It's a fascinating thing to just think about, But the key thing is that you can move forward. Now, here's something that is very interesting. Now, as you correctly pointed out, there is also this link with music and the golden spiral. In fact, this particular church, this particular chapel in Scotland, the Roslin Chapel, is a very special chapel. In fact, what is interesting here is that you find the angels in the pillar is actually holding on certain notes of the string. So the notes of music is present here, and then you also find a pattern that is on top of this on top of the string. On top of this particular angel. Now, what is interesting about this pattern is that, and there's someone who has actually dedicated a lot of research and has done a lot of research into this chapel and so forth, is that you actually find different kind of patterns that actually resonate with cymatic patterns formed by different kinds of sounds. And it is almost very interesting that when you hold these particular, when you play these musical chords, the corresponding cymatic pattern that you actually observe is that of this, the shape that is on the pillar. And that was very fascinating kind of research to see those kind of patterns literally being
They
repeated.
knew.
You know, by the,
They knew.
yep, exactly. So they knew that this hidden link with geometry, they knew this hidden link with, you know, this, the music and these patterns, they knew the sacred geometrical elements and so forth.
And this is how mantras
Yeah,
work, because we're mostly water. So when we chant our mantras,
exactly.
that's what's
Mhm.
happening to our body. Those sacred geometric
Exactly.
patterns are
Ex-
happening in our body, and everything starts to align.
Exactly. Now, remember, Chitra Nakshatra, which you're talking about, is actually linked with the sculptor, you know. So you'll always find in every sculpture, any piece of architecture at the highest level, it will carry a Venusian energy there. It will carry a Venusian energy there. So an element of Venus will be present there, you know. Now, especially in the, now here, what is interesting about certain chapels and stuff is that when you actually listen to music, within the harmonic structures of a chapel, right? So like when many composers would play, it used to be that the Vatican would have these musical compositions played, you know, only once a year and so forth. But when that music was playing out within that particular structure, you know, you actually shifted your consciousness in a very stronger fashion, you know, and it was almost easy to surrender yourself to God when you actually combined all the nakshatras of Venus together. That is a way to think about that. You know, you have Chitra Nakshatra, which is actually the point of the sculpture, which is actually the background where the thing is happening and where the musical orchestra is playing. And then you have the architecture, the piece of architecture, which is again, you know, the celestial architect is linked with Chitra Nakshatra. And then you have the Swati Nakshatra, where a lot of people are gathered in a chapel and when they're playing the musical orchestra. And then you finally have the point of surrender, which is Revati Nakshatra, where is the point of surrender, the point of moksha. And there were many people who actually would experience deep states of godhood and so forth. In fact, there's a requirement that when certain priests were being ordained in the Vatican Church, that there's certain specific kind of symphonies had to be playing in the background. So they knew it, you know, they kind of knew it, and so that the one who was being ordained would experience that shift in consciousness much more easily, you know, in that regard. But the point which you mentioned about mantras and sacred geometry is very important. So that's what it will come down to, you know, in the subsequent slides. Now, but again, I want to highlight this point or this link with between cymatics and Venus. Now, cymatics is this entire field in which you play different musical tones and or even frequencies, and you obtain very particular patterns when you play out these frequencies. Each of these musical notes are having its own frequencies. When you play that upon sand, which is on top of a vibrating board, and when you vibrate that board at this particular frequency of the musical note, these exact specific kind of geometric patterns is actually formed. So it's very you find very beautiful kind of patterns also being formed. You know, it's very fascinating in that regard also, you know,
Can I show
and
you
very
something?
specific kind of patterns.
Let me show you
Yeah, go
something
ahead. Yeah,
fast. You're gonna
yeah,
laugh.
sure. Yeah.
So, you know, Michael Lee Hill, he makes these coasters. This is the
Nice.
432 hertz. And
Nice.
that's the frequency that you should be playing your music at, not 440. Now, in other words, you should tune your A to 432 and not 440. But what happens is, if you put your drink on top of these patterns, the thinking is that it will help embed itself into whatever you're drinking, and that you will, you know, just like cymatics, be getting
Yeah, for
that
sure. You know,
into you, you know.
exactly that. Exactly that. You know, so and as you correctly said, you know, when you chant a mantra, like for instance, this is actually the Sri yantra on the left, and this is the Om mantra forming itself, the cymatic pattern of the Om mantra that you find see on the right. So it's almost like this Om is carrying this energy of Sri yantra pattern within it. You know, and here's a very fascinating, and there are a lot of cymatic patterns out there. And think about all the mantras that you could chant and the kind of geometry. the pattern that is being formed within your own body and your mind, and correspondingly your consciousness also,
Right.
So
Well, the
that is a
reason why
very deep.
yeah, the reason 432 is important is because there's 27 nakshatras. Multiply that by 4, you get 108, which is the number of times we should chant our mantras. And then you multiply 108 by 4 and you get 432. That's why it is the mother hertz frequency. And then from there, like, 528, and then you go up from there. But there's certain ones that when you hit them, they're like the foundation frequencies,
Yeah, definitely. So for sure, definitely the frequencies and those corresponding patterns are very much important, and very much once you start linking with it, you begin to harmonize yourself with nature, natural law itself, and that's going to shift a lot of things for you. But when you begin to think about the golden spiral, right? When you think about the nakshatra of Venus, you can actually link this with certain other aspects. For instance, when you think about the seahorse, which is Purvashada, which is actually the horse of the water, right? And Purvashada is actually having a link with the water, with the ocean, and so forth also. And now you look at the seahorse that is found in the ocean, you actually find this golden spiral literally being present there. Purvashada is also with shells, all the shell decor items and so forth. And especially the golden spiral, the golden ratio is maintained in the shell very easily. Nautilus shell is one of the foremost representations of the golden spiral, which is very much present in the ocean. And then you look at the womb where a child is being born, you can actually see the golden spiral being present. The child that is formed in the womb is actually following the path of a golden spiral also. Now remember, this golden spiral is present also in the womb in many other ways. You can see that the left and right, there is a golden spiral being present and so forth. And that's a very interesting thing about that. And of course, the golden spiral is present not only in the child that is being born in the womb, is also very much seen in the universe itself at the level of the stars and galaxies and so forth. You will actually find galaxies themselves spiraling in the form of golden spirals. So that is very fascinating thing again. And then finally, when you look at Pura Falguni Nakshatra, which is actually linked with the womb, with the Hiranyagarbha, so you actually find that the egg shape is also having a hidden golden spiral embedded within it. You can actually find a golden spiral within the egg also, And I think this is the picture of a pine cone, if I'm not mistaken, perhaps a pineapple, if I'm not mistaken, But then, you see that,
that's also the pineal gland.
Exactly, yeah, definitely. The pineal gland is a very important, important gland. The third eye gland, where you get to see gods and goddesses. Exactly, where you get to see the greater harmonies in nature. For sure. But the key thing here is that you can see the golden spiral in the Venus nakshatras if you look for it. You'll see that actually being present in the child that is being born in Bharani nakshatra. You'll find that present in the womb energy, which is actually the egg, which is actually giving you the child in the Purva Falguni Nakshatra, and you find literally in Purvashada Nakshatra in the ocean, you find a lot of golden spirals there, and that's a very interesting thing to think about, something interesting to consider, something we should be thinking about as well, eventually in the future. Now, here's the best way to think about Venus. Venus is actually the sacred geometry that brings about harmony. In fact, the pentagram is actually embedding the golden ratio within it. We find that even Botticelli's both of Venus painting had hidden a lot of golden ratio within it, and he had the way of perspective in which the light would follow in the painting literally embedded the golden spirals in many portions of the painting. For those with the eyes to see, they will definitely be seeing it. And definitely, you'll find this sacred geometry being embedded in Chitra Nakshatra also, which is the nakshatra of the sculpture's nakshatra, the artist, the architect nakshatra. So if Chitra Nakshatra is actually linked with the energy of architecture, you can expect Venus energy to be present there in the energy of architecture with the energy of the universal architecture. You'll find that Venus energy, person being in the universe, the universe is designed in a sacred geometrical fashion that is designed to bring harmony eventually. And that is the role of Venus in the end. You'll find that in natural geometry that you surround yourself with, or that is actually present, is literally linked with the harmony in your life. That's why some things feel more beautiful. Yeah, go ahead, Katya.
I think just breaking down that idea of harmony and and the spiral in music, what's happening is you're literally sliding from one note to the next. So when you're sliding, there's a kind of massaging that's going on of the notes, and musically that's called melisma. And melisma is a quality that you'll see in some of the most beautiful Indian singers, where they have that kind of warbly quality to their vocals. It's inherent in Arab music, Turkish as well, and you can hear the golden ratio happening. You can hear that, and it's also in art it's called the arabesque.
Yeah, that's very interesting, for sure. Definitely, you can directly experience the golden ratio. Now, that's the next point that I'm going to slide towards. Now, we know that Jupiter is the guru of the devas, whereas Venus, the prominent role of Venus is actually the guru of the asuras. Now, if you look at the actual mythological story, there's an interesting mythological aspect in which the Jupiter is actually Graha Jupiter is considered to be married with Tara. There is a story in which Tara elopes with the moon god Soma. And you find that in the war that happens, in the argument that happens that follows this elopement, you find that Shukracharya, who is Venus, actually sides with Tara and Soma. And then there is a big war that happens between the Suras or the gods and the Asuras, which is the demons.
Is Tara Earth? I'm sorry, is
no,
Tara
yeah. Close. Tara is actually stars. Tara actually translates as stars.
Oh.
That's something interesting thing about.
Yeah.
Soma is actually the moon god.
Okay.
So interesting, you find that there is a deep link between Tara, Soma, and Shukracharya or Venus. Why? Because Shukracharya actually sided with the Tara and Soma, with Tara being stars. Remember, Tara actually translates as stars. And then Soma is actually the moon god himself, who is very much present when you see the stars. It's very interesting to think about as well. But if you combine all of whatever we discussed so far, right, eventually we can come to this kind of an interesting kind of an observation. Now the mantra Om is creating this particular cymatic pattern of the Sri Yantra on the right side. But remember, Om is the mantra that is actually linked with Jupiter also at the same time. So Jupiter is also linked with the chanting of mantra Om. In fact, Punvasu Nakshatra, one of the mantras of Punvasu Nakshatra, which is a Jupiter Nakshatra, is the mantra Om. So mantra Om is a mantra you can repeat yourself continuously, because Punvasu is also the Nakshatra repetition. Now, if you think like that, if you think about mantra Om as being linked with Jupiter, now you can make a very simple kind of analogy. One is that you can consider that now, of course, for every mantra you chant, there is a color and form. There is a sacred geometrical pattern associated with every mantra. That is considered the geometrical form, the yantra of a particular mantra is considered to be very superior. It is seen only by the great seers. That's why there was a reason why when you're chanting one particular god or goddess, you would actually have a yantra of that particular god and goddess also, to which you would chant that mantra towards, because you are actually working that particular sacred geometry within the higher planes, And now, for every mantra you chant, know that there is a 100%, there is a geometrical pattern, there is a sacred geometry that is linked with it, So then, if you think about mantras as linked with Jupiter, you can think about Jupiter as being sacred speech, the planet that is linked with sacred speech or the mantras that you chant. And Venus is the actual sacred form of that speech, the sacred geometry that is linked with that particular mantra. And now, and interestingly, you find this thing in which Jupiter is actually the guru of the suras or the gods, and then Venus is the god of the asuras, right? The demons, as it's called. Now, again, fascinating thing is that Guru of the Surah actually translated as sound also. And Guru of the Asuras is literally translated as Guru of the Asura, something that is not sound, that is form. So that is a very interesting thing to think about. So you have this interesting link between the suras, which is sound, which is considered to be formless, and then you have the link between god of the asuras, which is not sound, but that is actually form. So your solid objects, right, the solidity, something that can be ascribed a form to, that is actually linked with the asuras, which is Venus. So you can understand this interesting pattern, but know that there is no difference in the end. One is actually sacred speech, which is formless. The other is actually sacred geometry, which is actually form, something that you see. So it's a very interesting thing to think about.
Yeah,
but
because
I think
Jupiter and Venus don't get along, Jupiter doesn't like
exactly,
Venus
yeah,
because she teaches
exactly.
the Asuras, and he's like, "What? This is sacred knowledge. You're not supposed to give it away."
Exactly that. So that's an important thing to understand, because usually with usually with Jupiter and Venus, one thing we all tend to forget about is usually this idea that they say that only the Jupiter is considered to be the right way to approach things, but know that there is a corresponding Venusian way also, and perhaps the Venusian way is hidden from the masses, because why Venus is actually exalted in the 12th house. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you'll
Well,
find that for
Venus
sure.
teaches Tantra. That's the thing. That's the difference. Jupiter does
Yep,
not.
Venus. Yep, exactly. And Venus, as you correctly pointed out, Venus is very, very freely sharing information with the Asuras.
Yeah.
Jupiter, at the same time, is very. You find priests only willing to teach the mantras only to those belonging to certain belief systems, or even to certain castes and so forth. Whereas
Exactly.
Guru not. So it is a very interesting thing, So you can find actually this sacred form or the sacred geometry energy of Venus playing out in the deep metaphysical level also, And the same thing even with Jupiter and energy, the sacred sound, the mantras you speak and so forth. So we tend to make this distinction between Jupiter and Venus, or like the path of the mantras versus path of the tantra, and that is the other thing also. But know that at the end, both are one and the same. Both are essentially describing the same thing in different kind of a lens, So lens of consciousness, to be precise. Yeah. So that is what is actually happening, And but remember, what we have done here is that we have uncovered very deep aspects of Venus through the nakshatras that it is linked with. That's what you have done here. We analyzed how sacred geometry linked with Chitra can actually link with the highest form of surrender, which is Revati, which is the Revati. And what is interesting is that you find sacred geometry literally in the sculptures that you look out there, the architecture, the divine architecture of temples, churches, and so forth. You find that very strongly there. And the other point is also that of and how the anything Venusian. If as far as you're looking at anything that is considered to be Venusian, you will deeply begin to find these nakshatra principles and the other Venusian principles playing out also in those karkatwas or the significations of Venus, one way or the other. So say you want to improve your marriage, which is a Venusian kind of thing, use more of sacred geometry kind of thing. Use the Venus nakshatras consciously, and that kind of thing. You'll find that is actually enhancing the marriage. You say you want to improve your art, use the Venus nakshatras again consciously, and use pictures, use Swati, which is socialization, travel, for instance, which is Swati also. Revati is also surrender, surrender is also deep time spent in contemplation. So you'll find a lot of artists do these um, retreats, or they are recluse themselves, they isolate themselves to create pieces of art and so forth. So all that is there, So hopefully now there is a understanding, there is a flavor of Venus through the nakshatras, that's what I'm hoping. So hopefully that's been clear. But
Yeah.
yeah, great, Katya.
Yeah, and
Uh,
the way you guys that you can really use this is always, I always think about especially when I'm working with transits, that it's really it's algebra. You're trying to find the least common denominator. So you're just constantly what disposits to what, And so you always want to look at that planetary ruler of the nakshatra of whatever planet's there and look where that transiting planet is, because that's going to unlock the secrets of that planet and tell you what its hidden agenda is.
Yes, definitely.
That's how we use these the rulers, because a lot of people say, oh, well, you gotta, look at the Rashi, ruler, and just look at the deity of the nakshatra. No, it's the planetary ruler unlocks so much. And so that's why we're, looking into these hidden, more esoteric meanings of the nakshatras. So thank you so much, Santhip. I so appreciate your time and your attention. This was a wonderful presentation, especially because Venus is retrograde right now. Are there any last words you want to say about Venus retrograde?
Yeah, I would just say that smell some flowers, that's what I would actually say. That's what I would just say.
Yeah.
Yeah, smell some flowers. In fact, you'll be surprised how it can actually improve your well-being. You spend your time in a home, get a plant, get a white flowering plant, use that, put that in your home, smell that. You find yourself walking the path. When you come across a flower, just start smelling that. Of course, if you have allergies and stuff, that's a different thing. But still, I would actually encourage to smell flowers, because you'll see that smell aspect is actually enhancing your Venus in many accounts. You can see that if you'll see that the time spent on doing those little things, continuing the softer things, the being gentle about things is actually helping out a lot. You'll find that a lot, In fact, Venus is the planet of gentleness. Now, a flower is a gentle thing. You have to be gentle when you're holding a flower, right? Otherwise, you can crush it. So that's the exact point, So when you begin to smell some flowers, eventually over a period of time, you'll begin to embody the aspects of consciousness that is linked with Venus. When you smell some flowers, when you work with some flowers and so forth. And eventually you can extract or use that particular consciousness in all other areas of your life. You can be gentle with people you meet, a plant of compassion and so forth. And that is definitely going to connect you with deeper aspects of yourself at the end. So initially, there's a lot of flower-based things one can do. In fact, there is a very powerful flower-based meditation also. You meditate upon a flower. You contemplate yourself as being the flower. You contemplate yourself as being the aspects of flower, the fragrance part, the beauty part, and the odd part. And then contemplate itself being the way the flower transforms itself. Like how it's birth, how it becomes a flower, and how it dies also. And there is definitely a sense of beauty even in that as well. When you contemplate upon a flower deeply, there's a lot of things you can do with that.
The cycle.
But start by.
Yeah, what I've noticed is that like our peonies just opened, and they opened on the new moon. Last year they opened on the full moon. So the moon definitely, really controls a lot of the blossoming of the flowers. It's interesting to notice. But yeah, our peonies are opening is so beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. Spend some time with flowers, spend some time around flowers, smell some flowers, that's what I would just say. So yeah, that will be my last word. To be frank,
Very good. Oh, thank you so much, Santhip. I appreciate it so much. And next time we'll do Mars, right? That's the next one.
Right.
Yes.
Right, we'll do Mars, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'll see you next time.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.